June 8th, 2023 meeting of the Parker Planning Commission to order at 7 p.m. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The roll call, absent is Eric and Nick, Ileana, Kim, and Ira. Seated for Eric, let's say, is Jane. So then next, are there any additions to or deletions from the agenda?
No, sir, there are not.
Okay. Are there any, next is the approval of the minutes of the May 11th, 2023 meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? No? Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from 5/11/2023.
I'll second.
It's been motioned by Ruth Ann and seconded by Rich and Roxy that we approve the Planning Commission meetings from May 11th, 2023. I'll call the question. Jane?
Aye.
Roxy?
Aye.
Ruth
Aye.
Ann? Rich?
Aye.
Chair is aye. The minutes are approved. All right, next. The next item is a public hearing, Stroh Ranch Plan Development, Third Amendment. We will open the public hearing at 7:02. Are there any commissioners that need to disclose conflicts of interest or other contact related to the project?
No.
No.
The purpose of this public hearing is to consider rezoning of the Stroh Ranch PD, amending the mixed-use planning area. The presentation by town staff will include an overview of the rezoning, including 1, the details of the project, 2, a summary of the criteria contained in the town code that must be considered by the Planning Commission in its review of a rezoning, and 3, a recommendation based on the analysis conducted by staff. Once the staff's presentation is complete, the Planning Commission will ask questions of staff. Please know that staff has provided a copy of all the emails and correspondence sent by the public, and they are included in our staff's report packet that we have reviewed. These emails are part of the public record. Upon completion of the town staff presentation, the applicant will make a presentation regarding the application. Once the applicant's presentation is complete, Planning Commission will ask questions of the applicant and the staff. Upon the completion of the applicant's presentation, the public testimony portion of this hearing will begin. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to make their presentation. Time cannot be traded or accumulated between individuals. The town staff will control the timer, which you will see above me. There are several members of the public that desire to testify tonight, so please be clear and concise with your comments. Please try not to repeat testimony repeated by other members of the public. You can certainly indicate that you agree with other speakers without restating their entire testimony. I hope that you filled out a public comment card that was provided to you when you entered the chambers. If not, there are comment cards in the back of the room which you can fill out and hold until you're ready to speak. I understand that many members of the community wish to provide comment on the application. However, I ask that you respect the statements that are made by town staff, the applicant, members of the public, and my fellow planning commissioners. It is important that this public hearing be held in a dignified and respectful manner. To this end, there should only be one speaker at a time with no audience participation or reaction. Please do not clap, yell, boo, or make additional commentary from the audience or otherwise interrupt the proceedings. Following public testimony, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond. Please note that any questions from the public to the Planning Commission staff or the applicant will not be addressed during public testimony. Town staff or the applicant will address the questions that are relevant to the rezoning after the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. I will close the public hearing after the final comments are made by town staff. I will then open the debate and discussion of the evidence that pertains to the rezoning and the criteria among the Planning Commission members until there is a call for a motion and a recommendation to Town Council. I will now ask town staff to begin their presentation. Julia?
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. Thank you for having me this evening. Before you is the Stroh Ranch Plan Development Third Amendment. The staff report for the project was posted on June 1st, 2023 on the town's website. Subsequent to posting, town staff received a number of public comments via email and letters. These comments have been uploaded to the publicly accessible website Track It and have been provided to the Planning Commission. There are 16 emails in your packet, 36 letters, an HOA letter, and a letter from Regency. Located west of Parker Road, south of Hess Road, north of Stroh Road, and east of Motzenbacher Road, the Stroh Ranch Plan Development was annexed into the town in 1984 and amended by ordinance in both 2004 and 2013. The applicant is proposing a PD amendment to add 275 units to the Stroh Ranch PD and allocate them to the mixed-use planning areas for filings 14 and 15, as well as amend the commercial uses permitted within the same planning area. The request for the Plan Development Third Amendment is seeking to modify the residential dwelling unit maximum within the mixed-use planning area on approximately 23 acres of vacant land. These undeveloped parcels were previously platted under Stroh Ranch filings 14 and 15 and are currently designated as mixed use, MU, within the PD. The current mixed-use planning area allows a number of uses by right, including multifamily residential and commercial uses, which include more intensive automotive service uses. The purpose of the request is to allocate units to the mixed-use area and eliminate the higher intensity automotive uses. No changes are proposed to any of the development standards within the PD. Height, setbacks, massing are all remaining the same. The project proposes a mix of residential uses, commercial uses, as well as parks and open space. If the amendment is approved, a future site plan submittal will be required. The proposed project includes 275 market rate residential dwelling units and a minimum of 39,500 square feet of commercial area. The amendment proposes an increase in the total number of dwelling units from 2,817, which is currently allowed under the PD, to 3,092, an increase of less than 10%. Of the 2,817 currently allowed units, only 2,596 were ever built, 221 dwelling units less than the maximum currently allowed. Therefore, the proposed amendment amounts to a 1.88% density increase compared to the current PD. The existing PD allows a density of up to 22 dwelling units per an acre in the mixed-use area. However, the proposed amendment would result in less than 12 dwelling units per acre. The proposal would also create new mixed-use commercial areas designated on the plan, which would limit the development to only commercial uses. These areas are located along Stroh Road and a parcel on the northeast portion of the site. The amendment eliminates several high-intensity commercial land uses that are currently allowed under the plan and which include automotive service uses, gasoline stations, and car washes. Those uses would no longer be permitted under this amendment. These uses, in addition, 39,500 square feet of commercial retail space is required. A minimum of 9,500 square feet of commercial retail space shall be constructed as a ground floor component of the vertical mixed-use buildings, and an additional 30,000 square feet of commercial retail in 3 designated locations, including 2 parcels along Stroh Road and a separate parcel near the northeast corner of the site. The subject property is located within a community center, which are generally situated at major intersections. Their physical characteristics include the concentration of commercial development near the intersections of major arterials or collector streets. Important commercial retail corners should be accessible to transit, are walkable, have good automobile access, are visible from the roadway, and have the potential to connect to a neighborhood. Higher density residential use is integrated into the center design. Higher density residential is appropriate in these centers as a transition between less intense residential areas and non-residential areas when developed as part of a mixed-use development and when the design encourages residents to walk or bicycle to obtain goods and services. Mixed-use planning areas within neighborhood centers and community centers are required to have no less than 33% of their total land area developed for commercial use. The proposed development accommodates 39,500 square feet of commercial uses. The northwest corner of Stroh Road and Parker Road is developed with commercial uses currently, totaling 22.5 acres. The existing and proposed commercial area would amount to 25.1 acres of the total 47.7 acres of land area at that corner, which is 52.6%, exceeding the 33% stated within the Parker 2035 master plan for required commercial uses. The proposed amendment to the PD is consistent with the master plan. There are 9 criteria used to evaluate a rezoning. These criteria ensure that a need exists, the proposal is consistent with the master plan, and there are adequate services to serve the proposed site. I'll touch on a few of those criteria. Is it the correct site for the proposed development? The current zoning allows for mixed use, including both residential and commercial uses. That's the existing designation of the mixed use area for this PD. 2, adequate circulation exists and traffic movement would not be impeded by development. A traffic impact study was submitted with the PD zoning application. The report will be evaluated by engineering staff and will also be subsequently evaluated through the site plan process. Traffic mitigation measures will be based on impacts determined through the analysis. 3, municipal service costs will not be incurred with which the town is not prepared to meet. The town does not anticipate significant municipal service costs with the proposed zoning that it is not prepared to meet. The proposed additional use will be consistent with existing adjacent uses and within planning areas originally intended for both residential and commercial uses. Number 4, the proposal is consistent with the town master plan, maps, goals, and policies. As part of the community center character area, the allowance of additional units is consistent with the intent of the original mixed-use designation as well as the PD. After evaluating the zoning information, staff has determined that the proposal meets the 9 approval criteria set forth in the land development ordinance as set forth in the staff report. Staff has reviewed the proposal and has determined that the project is consistent with the master plan, and utility providers have confirmed capacity and availability, and all notice requirements have been satisfied. Therefore, staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve the Stroh Ranch Plan Development Third Amendment. This concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions you may have. We also have the applicant, Mill Creek and Norris Design, here to present and answer questions as well.
Questions for Julia?
Julia, you did a lot of numbers really fast. So I just want to go back and go over, in a commercial area, in the area that's considered, it's not regional, it's not neighborhood, it's the,
Community Center.
thank you, community, word escaped me. In that area, there has to be a minimum amount of commercial used within that entire circle, is that correct?
The 2035 Town of Parker Master Plan recommends a minimum of 33% within that
Entire circle,
circumference,
correct?
yes.
Okay, and with this proposal, what is the percentage or the percentage of commercial that will be in that community center area?
Let me find it. So there's existing 22.5 acres. The existing and proposed commercial area would be 25.1 acres, so approximately 3.4 additional acres of commercial space, which is 52.6% of the 47.7 acres.
Okay, so that meets that. Thank you. Could you define market rate for me? You've used that term a couple of times. I'd just like to know what that means.
Sure, what the market dictates, so it's not covenanted or deed restricted on affordability. It's the price is determined by market rates.
So that's to distinguish it from, say, attainable housing, affordable housing, anything that would be restricted that way, correct?
Correct. It's not deed restricted or a part of any affordable housing programs.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have right now. I'll have more later.
Jane?
Go ahead.
Roxy?
All right, I have a question or two here. So just kind of listening to, I read the staff report, again, a lot of numbers, like Ruth Ann said. So this is mixed use, currently zoned mixed use, correct? And with that, it allows for medium-density residential, correct?
So that's medium-density residential within this community center commercial. So the master plan has two designations. Because this is at the intersection of an intense intersection, it's a community center. So it has different parameters than a medium-density residential neighborhood.
Okay, yeah, and then I recognize it's in the Parker commercial corridor as well. I don't think that was called out, but it's all part of the same corridor in the master plan. But the point I was kind of getting to is that the restriction of 3.5 dwelling units per acre of medium density, is that one of the specific reasons that we're attempting to rezone here today?
Actually, no, because the community center designation in the master plan allows for higher density than that 3.5, and it doesn't specifically call it out. Within the existing plan development, the maximum density allowed in that planning area is 22 dwelling units per acre. What's being requested here tonight is actually less than that 22. It equates to 12 dwelling units per acre. So while the medium density residential has that dwelling unit requirement, the community center designation supersedes that. So the request tonight is specifically related to the PD and not the master plan.
Okay, yeah, I was drawing some confusion with, and it's in the comments that the HOAs provided as well as with their letter calling that out. So I wanted to be as clear as possible and for everyone out here to be clear with that. I had another question for you. So there was a mention of eliminating automotive care centers. Is there a specific reason that they have been targeted to be eliminated in the possibility of commercial?
We thought this would be an appropriate community benefit to eliminate some higher intensive uses. We do have other PDs, specifically the Parker Auto Plaza PD within the town, that allow for automotive uses. There's a list of specific commercial uses, a number of which in this particular PD would have allowed tire services, gas stations, car washes. Those have all been eliminated to allow for higher end retail.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was a specific reason. I know that there is all of the above within a short radius of this parcel, so, okay.
Thanks.
I have a bunch of questions. So if I'm understanding correctly, the dwelling units per acre that's being referenced is for the entire PD and not just the amended portion or proposed amendment portion of the PD. Is that correct?
The 22 or the 12?
Can you explain them both for me and the audience?
Sure. The PD allows for a maximum density for this planning area specifically of 22 dwelling units per acre. The amendment would allow what they're proposing, the 275 dwelling units per acre equates to 12 dwelling units per acre. The 275 dwelling units equates to 12 dwelling units per acre, as opposed to the maximum allowed under the PD, which would have been 22 dwelling units per acre.
So in this planning area specifically, the number of units per acre is lower density.
Than what was originally allowed under the PD, correct? Yes.
Right, and so the staff report specifically states that there is no availability of transfer of units from one portion of the PD to this one because it was not exercised at a previous moment in time. So we're changing the density, but we're changing it within this particular couple of filings.
Correct.
My other question is this. So one of the criteria is that it needs to meet engineering standards for roadway design. And the staff report does not specifically call out that it has been approved by the engineering department, but rather that it will be. And so I'm a little bit confused by that. Can you explain?
Good evening. My name's Alex Meston with the engineering department. My department did do a review of the traffic study. I think what Julie is alluding to is that we will continue to review the study when actual development plans come forward. They will have to either conform to those or do new studies depending on how the development proceeds.
So this particular proceeding is about zoning, and it has been approved and reviewed for the zoning purposes as proposed, and then it will be further consulted when the site plan is proposed.
Correct.
Thank you.
I have a question, Julia. Over my tenure of 7 years on the Planning Commission, we've had several presentations by town staff. And in those presentations, they've stated they have a guideline, and not a law, not a rule, it's just a guideline of an 80-20 rule, meaning that there's 80% single-family to 20% multifamily. And all of that time, pretty much the town has stayed in that guideline, whether it's varied a little. I mean, it's not a strict 80-20, but it's 78-22 or 82-18. Do you know if we're still in that kind of a range of 80-20 or single-family to multifamily?
We actually ran the numbers again this evening, and we are 80% single-family, 20% multifamily, and that's consistent in the majority of Douglas County and other jurisdictions within the county.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? All right. Does the applicant want to step forward to the podium? State your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, town staff, and members of the public. My name is Carolyn White, and I'm Land Use Counsel for the applicant, Mill Creek Residential. Thank you for the opportunity to present our application to you this evening. First, I'd like to briefly introduce the team, and I won't introduce them all by name, but I want to let you know we have a number of professionals of different disciplines here available to answer your questions, even though not all of them are part of our prepared presentation. Our presentation tonight will have four main parts. First, an introduction to Mill Creek Residential, an overview of the PD amendment and the conceptual site plan. You're right, the actual site plan will be submitted at a later date. A summary of how the PD amendment meets the criteria in the code, and a summary of the public outreach process and the changes that were made to the proposal as a result of that public outreach process. So I'd like to start by inviting Nick Halstead, Managing Director of Development for Mill Creek Residential, to tell you a little bit about who they are.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, Tanner Parker, Planning Commission, for the opportunity to appear before you tonight. Move this forward. Yep. Am I pointing it at something?
There you go.
Oh, sorry. I also want to thank the Town of Parker Planning staff for their efforts since early 2022 in assisting us with getting this far along in the entitlement process. As mentioned, I'm Nick Halstead from Mill Creek Residential, here with Scott McKee. We are the locally based representatives of the Mill Creek Residential team. Mill Creek is a national development firm that includes 23 regional offices around the country, including the Denver market. We've been active locally in Denver for over the last 12 years, with a substantial number of residential and mixed-use communities completed, under construction, or in the entitlement pipeline. For completed projects, we have delivered more than 1,500 apartment homes across 7 communities since 2017. We currently have 550 apartment homes under construction in 2 communities, with a further 1,000 homes in our development pipeline, inclusive of this proposal in Parker. Furthermore, Mill Creek is a direct owner of all of our developed communities and is a full-service firm with its own development, construction general contractor, and operations teams. We develop, we build, we own, and we manage all of our communities. I'll turn it back over to Carolyn to walk us through the proposed PD zoning amendment.
All right, so as you've already heard, we're here tonight to present an amendment to the Stroh Ranch PD. For the reasons we'll describe in our presentation tonight, we believe that our proposal is better suited for this property than precisely what was envisioned under the original PD. But yet what we are proposing does not stray very far from that original vision. As was explained a little bit by staff, it's not a fundamental change to the uses, mixed use, residential, multifamily, and commercial already allowed. It's not a dramatic change to the density. In fact, it's less than the maximum density allowed under the PD. It's really a minor change in terms of allocating additional units to this particular filing within the Stroh Ranch PD and eliminating some of those auto-centric uses that were itemized and are listed up here on the screen. The other key component of this proposal is that it requires a minimum of 39,500 square feet as part of this development. About 9,500 of that will be ground floor component of vertically mixed-use buildings, and another 30,000 feet can be as individual standalone out parcels. These amount to an increase in density, a net increase in density of 54 units total, or about 1.9% of the overall Stroh Ranch PD. So now I'd like to turn the podium over to Bill Maher, Norris Design, to provide more detail about the PD amendment and the conceptual site plan that would be implemented if the PD amendment is approved. Get this out of your way.
Thank you, Carolyn, and thank you, members of the Planning Commission, for the consideration tonight. My name is Bill Maher with Norris Design, 1101 Banning Street, Denver, Colorado, 80204. And I would like to echo Nick's comments. We've appreciated the professionalism and coordination over the past 2 years with working with town staff. And you see on the slide in front of you the vicinity map. The subject property, as shown on this slide, was annexed in 1984 and is comprised of several vacant undeveloped parcels totaling 23 acres at the northwest corner of Stroh Road and Parker Road, and is part of the Stroh Ranch PD that was adopted in 2004. And on this slide, I will just provide an overview of some of the merits of the project. I must say, we are very excited to be here tonight. We've been working on this zoning request for 2 years to make sure it aligns with the town's goals and staff expectations for a thoughtful new community. In this slide, we'll describe our rezoning request in a little bit more detail. Particularly, what we want to focus on are the community benefits associated with this request that we're very proud of. First, the proposed rezoning supports the Town of Parker master plan, and this is acknowledged in the staff report on page 9. As it states, the uses, the required commercial development, and the densities are consistent with the intent of the master plan, as staff previously explained in their presentation. And when speaking about the rezoning will facilitate appropriate and desirable land uses on the property that has remained vacant since 1984. The conceptual site plan that you see here on the right of the slide is developed based on the merits of the PD zoning. Although we are not here tonight, as you understand, for approval of the site plan, however, we want to show you our intentional and thoughtful vision based on the negotiations and review of your codes over the past 2 years to show how it is beneficial to the community and achieves compatibility with the surrounding uses. And we achieve this really by exceeding minimum regulations. We want to make this a community that is good for the neighborhood and also good for the future residents. And with that, we are exceeding a lot of the minimum requirements that are part of your LDO. And we will get into that a little bit further. And as the staff report stated on page 9, as Parker's population has continued to grow, the need for a range of housing types has increased. With this zoning change, we will be able to address housing options that will provide market rate multifamily homes in a thoughtfully planned community, which, quite frankly, in our work are often sought by young professionals, and the older population is a niche that's sometimes forgotten. And this new neighborhood will include a mix of uses, as Julia mentioned in her staff report, including a couple key areas that include vertical integration by way of buildings with ground floor retail space with homes above, essentially mixed use on those buildings. And we take very thoughtful consideration to pedestrian connections and enhanced walkability, as we feel they're very important to the site. And we know Parker well. And that's a hallmark of Parker neighborhoods. You're very proud of your open space, your parks, your trail systems, and we want to reflect that in this development. And ensure that we're providing those amenities and trails in ways that people of all ages and abilities can navigate them. We know that's an important factor. And thoughtfully, we've integrated commercial as a part of this proposed community, nearly 40,000. And it's kind of hard to see on the slide, but I will explain that when we break the slide up into a couple different slides. And this will permanently be recognized as commercial zoning. And we worked with the staff to thoughtfully locate it next to the arterial roadways with the intent to not place commercial very much in the interior of the new neighborhood, because that would solicit traffic to go in on a routine basis for those commercial needs. We wanted to keep it thoughtfully considered against Stroh Road and Parker Road, which are your arterial roads. That's a great place for commercial to be. And also speaking about your values and your community for parks and open space, we're really proud of this fact. With this consideration for residential, it creates an automatic trigger for a park space and more open space than the current zoning if commercial develops there. And so with that, we will be required to provide 3.8 acres of activated, meaning playgrounds, places for people to sit, park pavilion, in an activated public space throughout this development. And we have a concept that we'll show, but that's just a concept at this point. And as we mentioned, we're eliminating certain intensive, incompatible commercial uses. And we also know that traffic can be a typical concern. We heard that from the public comment and meeting with the neighbors over the past year. And as we'll show you shortly, the community as proposed with the proposed residential actually generates far less traffic. And with that, I will transition to a couple slides that show the site plan in a little bit closer detail for you. Now taking a look on the south side of this conceptual site plan. The main access will be on Stroh Road. That's an existing access point. So we're not asking for additional access points to arterial roadways. On the south, there's approximately 2 acres of commercial retail land reserved exclusively for commercial uses as allowed per the PD. And our request is really trying to facilitate higher quality retail options than what is currently allowed by the current PD, and by way of eliminating those uses that we've heard through the public engagement process that may be less desirable. Auto uses that generate a lot of fumes and smoke and noise, and places for the neighborhood to convene and come together for goods and services. There's also a large buffer on the west side, and that is intended to be landscaped to provide a buffer from those 2-story homes that are existing on the west side of our property. And we've incorporated a building height transition with buildings that are closest to the existing 2-story homes on the west, which I just mentioned. And they're shown on the plan with the number 5, and they're in a kind of a tan color, if you can see that. And then we will scale up to 3-story homes further away to be very sensitive to those existing homeowners. And those are shown in blue, as you see along the east side of the development. And that was determined through discussions with staff and also meeting with neighbors and understanding their concerns. And so we took that into very thoughtful consideration. And then moving on to the north portion. There we go. On the north side of the site, we are proposing to, just like on the south, utilize existing points of access to J. Morgan and Parker Road. No new curb cuts to those roadways. And here you'll also see our nearly 4-acre park space, which will be improved and connected to the existing trail system. We told that to staff. Whoa, we're jumping ahead here. There we go. It is very touchy. Yeah, okay. So it is important for us to, there is established trails within the site that were put in many years ago, and we want to make sure there's connectivity with what we're proposing to those, and work with the neighborhood and HOA to improve those amenities. We have residential buildings shown in the central part of this area with a community clubhouse, which will feature a pool and other amenities for future residents. That is shown in, number 2 on the slide in front of you, kind of in the central east side of it. There's is another proposed commercial out parcel here along Parker Road. Again, limited to strictly commercial uses in a logical location next to Parker Road for easy access and accessibility and visibility, shown in number 4. And we have vertically integrated mixed-use buildings, meaning, commercial, retail, ground floor, floor above, residential. And those are shown in item number 3 and 3 called mixed use. And again, the northernmost building shown in tan on the very north portion of the site is limited to 2 stories tall to help provide a transition in scale from the existing 2-story residences to the north. Again, we did that to be sensitive and to understand the concerns of the neighborhood and also work with staff on that provision. And then moving on. Wait for it. There we go. Oh, almost had it. Okay. Here are a few conceptual renderings that show the vision of this new community. And please note, these are just conceptual right now. But we wanted to show you, we thought it was fair with this zoning request, to show you what are, just along with the site plan, to show you a perspective of what our vision is for this. And this is showing from Stroh Road, that existing access point that is established on Stroh Road. And you can see the dog spa, everybody wants a dog spa. On the right there, that is a commercial building. And then on the left is, you see a brick building. So that is a manifestation in the 3D rendering of where those 2 commercial buildings would be located. And then you transition into the neighborhood from there. And as you can see through the articulation and design of this slide, we are really focusing on creating a walkable street, tree-lined and landscaped. It's very important to us, and we feel to the town of Parker. It really meets the intent of a lot of your other developments. And then I just have a couple more. Okay, just showing more of the 2-story product and the pleasing walkable streetscape through this development. And then further east, away from the 2-story, we have some 3-story perspective models. And I want to go over this slide here. This is an overall bird's eye perspective, showing how the majority of the site fits into the context. As you see in the foreground, you see Parker Road. And then beyond the site, you see a lot of this, you see the established community of Parker. And overall, this just demonstrates what we hope is sensitivity to the land uses through uses of buffers, building height. As you can see, as I mentioned before, a lot of the buildings on the west end and some on the north are 2-story. And I hope you can see how they kind of blend in with the adjacencies as well. And we're also providing, as I mentioned, sidewalk connections all throughout this development to connect to the commercial and also the established residential. And we're very excited about the proposed park that you see in the foreground. If you see the call-out called 3 acres of public park space, again, this is a concept, but we've worked early on and with ideas brought this before staff and showed it at the public meeting as well of what our idea for a park space that would be open to the public, not just this community, and have a series of amenities that respond to all ages and abilities, playgrounds, walking trails for adults, those kinds of things. So we feel overall this site plan achieves an ideal transition to the adjacencies in a very thoughtful way. We took a lot of good care with that. And then moving on to a slide about traffic. I want to get you out of here as much as I can, too. There we go. Traffic. As we know, traffic sometimes can be a concern in land use applications. But with the traffic study that was prepared by Kimley Horn, it has demonstrated there is sufficient capacity in the existing roadways and circulation network to support this rezoning. The report also demonstrates affected intersections will continue to operate at a very acceptable level of service. And the study also shows that 100% of the commercial development, so if this development was developed as is currently could be allowed with 100% commercial build-out, it would result in, the new proposal would result in a 30% reduction than what could be built today. So with this residential, it brings the traffic amount down greatly. And all the internal roadways will be privately owned and maintained, and therefore there are no significant municipal costs or increases resulting from this rezoning. And also, as we noted earlier in the presentation, Mill Creek has stated a willingness to construct traffic calming and improvements in an effort to alleviate speeding and make for a safer and more pedestrian-friendly environment by working with the neighborhood and also the town staff on those. And from that, I will turn it over to Carolyn and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're now heading into section 3 of our presentation, which is where I'm going to connect the dots and talk about how the items that were just discussed by Bill about the PD amendment and the conceptual site plan meet the criteria in the code for a PD amendment. I won't take too much time because I know staff already covered this extensively, both in the staff report and in their presentation this evening, but there are a couple of things worth mentioning. The criteria, a need exists for the proposal. Clearly, there is a demand for the type of uses that are being proposed here, particularly the mix of uses that are being proposed here. The mixed use, the multifamily, the neighborhood scale commercial, and clearly the zoning as it previously existed was not conducive to having those mix of uses developed in this location. And we believe that this particular zoning change, which is really pretty surgical, is what it's going to take to get the right mix of uses developed here. This particular parcel ground is the correct site. You've heard the word transition mentioned a couple times this evening, and that's transition not only in how we propose to arrange the site internally with taller buildings closer to the commercial and shorter buildings closer to the existing residential, but also this whole site itself really serves as a buffer between the commercial higher intensity uses to the east and the residential lower intensity uses to the west. This is exactly the right site for this type of mixed use neighborhood commercial multifamily density. There's not been an error in the original zoning. That's not applicable. Clearly, there have been significant changes since 2004 when this PD has been amended in the area to warrant a zone change. There's a ton of data supporting the conclusion that adequate circulation exists and traffic movement will not be impeded by the development. In fact, there are some places where this proposed development is going to enhance the traffic circulation. There are no additional municipal service costs as identified by town staff in the staff report. Really minimal environmental impacts. We're talking about a vacant piece of ground in the very center of a fully developed area, so there are no impacts to sensitive vegetation, wildlife, or natural features. There are adequate utilities to accommodate the proposed project following the PD amendment. And then the last one, which I'll spend the most time on, which is that this proposal is indeed consistent with the town master plan, maps, goals, and policies. There was some discussion during the staff presentation of not only its consistency with the future land use map in terms of what types of uses are allowed here, but the percentage mix of commercial, which is consistent with that community center designation within the immediate hard four corners of the intersection. And then on this slide, we're summarizing and highlighting just a few of the many goals within the town master plan that would be supported and furthered by this development. There's that word transition again between different land uses and intensities, encouraging land uses that create a sense of community, and that's exactly what Mill Creek Residential is proposing to do here. Just a couple more. These are specific strategies identified in the master plan to achieve the goals that we just mentioned. Encourage multifamily housing units within mixed-use buildings. We've got mixed-use buildings here. Nurture and support established businesses and also ensure opportunities for expanded commercial activity. This project being built in this location with this density also will help sustain the existing businesses that are already located in this vicinity, not just immediately adjacent along Parker and Stroh, but also throughout this area. So I'd like to now turn it back over to Nick Halstead to just summarize for you the community outreach, and then I'll be back to make our final concluding remarks in just a moment. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Carolyn. Our last section deals with community outreach. Community outreach and engagement is an important part of the Mill Creek development process for every proposed community, and has been the case here as well. Since the outset of our engagement with the community in December of 2021, we've been communicating openly with the surrounding HOAs, including Stroh Ranch, Ironstone Condominiums, and Village on the Green, on a regular basis, culminating in the following. We held 2 open house meetings in May of 2022 where we gathered community feedback. We also held 6 meetings with HOA representatives from December 21 to today, where we engaged in thoughtful dialogue. In addition to those community outreach meetings, we also engaged in an extensive door-knocking campaign where we visited nearly 1,000 homes in the immediate area and had 180 direct conversations with residents. This effort resulted in 36 letters of support, and these have been included within our overall submission materials in the public comment packet. Furthermore, we also received a letter of support from Regency Centers, the owner of the adjacent shopping centers. And in that letter, they largely echo the planning staff report comments that additional residential and commercial mixed-use development will be complementary to the continued success of the shopping center and the surrounding area. At Mill Creek, we look forward to the opportunity to enhance the mixed-use offerings in Parker with this development. A couple of, I don't want to be too repetitive here, but a couple of the additional points we wanted to talk about. Density and traffic came up time and time again, as Bill mentioned, in our community outreach strategy. The aforementioned reduction to 11.9 dwelling units per acre relative to the maximum 22 was a key way we did that. I also want to mention that when we initially put forth this proposal, the density was 322. We've reduced it by 17% to the 275 that you see before you. A lot of that density reduction was related to the context sensitivity of reducing the 2-story buildings in select locations. Actually, go back here. And then traffic, we talked about this before, but a couple of nuances that weren't discussed is that there were additional planned connections to adjacent neighborhoods, including Village on the Green. Our proposal and design closes off those connections, focusing and facilitating traffic flow out to the main arterial roadways where it's better served by the existing infrastructure. We also have a commitment to traffic calming. We mentioned that our traffic study and analyses indicate that there are several potential improvements that could be implemented in several areas of the site. And although none are required, we are ready and willing to work with the community as a whole, as well as the Town of Parker Department of Engineering and Public Works, to implement those traffic improvements deemed both necessary and feasible. Quick point on this slide, we're proposing 11.9 dwelling units per acre. Our site provides the buffer that we feel a strong buffer between the adjacent commercial uses to the east and the residential developments to the west. And the residential developments to the northwest were developed at approximately 18 units per acre. We're proposing a reduction from that by a third down to 12. So I'll hit each of these in tow, but we have the commitment to the commercial in the correct locations on the main arterial roads. We've integrated additional mixed-use development opportunities along ground floors of certain buildings. We've reduced the height on the building edges closest to the single-family homes. We've increased buffers and sensitivity to adjacent uses as shown in red here. And then, last but not least, the integration of 3.8 acres of public park space. This really will be, a community amenity not just for the residents of Modera Parker, but for the residents of Parker as a whole. With that, I'd like to transition back to Carolyn for closing remarks.
Thank you. In conclusion, Mill Creek Residential listened. They engaged in substantial public outreach throughout the entire process and made meaningful changes to the proposal in order to respond to the public feedback that they received. The proposed project, as presented before you in this PD amendment, includes a number of significant community benefits. I won't repeat them. You can read them on the slide. And it also meets all the criteria and advances the master plan and the town vision and policies. At the end of the day, what we're talking about here is a very small change to a very small portion of the overall Stroh Ranch PD in order to make it more developable, more functional, and to deliver something that better meets the overall vision of the community and fits in this location. So for those reasons, we ask for your favorable recommendation, and our team's available to answer any questions. Thank you for your attention to our presentation this evening.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant?
I have a couple. The buildings for the commercial, the outlets, the two on the south side, the one on the north side, are there any restrictions on height for those, other than not more than 40 feet or anything like that?
You're asking the applicant, but you're looking at staff. Would you like staff to answer that?
I'm happy to, anybody who actually knows the answer can answer that.
The building height is dictated by the mixed-use development standards in Section K of the PD, which limits height to 40 feet.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So, so can you tell me exactly what the increase, we talked about a 32.6% decrease, but that's a decrease of what? That's a decrease of what would the increase be? So under the original PD, if we did not amend the PD, what would the total dwelling units permissible on this property as a mixed-use property be? As it currently stands?
Would you like me to answer that
Please,
question?
yes.
221 dwelling units if they had been transferred. There's 221 dwelling units that were not built within the PD that would have been available to the mixed-use planning areas.
Is there any other property within the PD planning areas that those dwelling units could also be applied to?
No.
So everything is completely built out except for these units?
For the 221, and the request is for 275. So if they're asking for 54 additional units, then what would have been allowed by right under the PD for this area?
Okay, and if this, so those 54 units, that really is the need that's presented here for needing to have a zoning amendment? Is that you need to have those extra 54 units? Because there's nothing else. I got the red line, I looked through it, there's really nothing else that's changed other than the fact that, you know, we'll have no more additional auto supply stores in that area, which we have a lot. So I'm trying to understand the need for the 54 units, because that's the need that for the zoning change, when you get right down to it.
I see. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I'll answer that as best I can. I might rely on someone else on the team to do that, but I want to also go back to something that staff said in their presentation, which we didn't hit quite so much in ours, and that is really the allocation of units, right? So the 221 units that could have been built under the original PD are gone now. They don't exist anymore. So we would still need a zoning amendment to get even that.
Okay.
But what we're proposing is a total of 275, reduced from the original proposal of 322. And the real reason is because that's what we think is the right density to fit here, to provide that critical mass of residential to support all the new neighborhood scale commercial that is being proposed here, as well as the existing commercial. I'll ask if there's anyone on the team who wants to add to that as in terms of the answer on behalf of the applicant. But the proposal really is 275, but the fundamental change is that 54 units, because under the original PUD, 221 could have been built at some point in time. They cannot be built today.
Right.
They magically disappeared somehow.
It's funny how that works.
Yes.
So let me just reiterate what was just said so that I think I understand, but I think it's hard for a member of the general public perhaps to understand. in that you're asking for 274 units, and then you're referring to these 221 units that were available, but they're not actually available at this particular moment in time. So your request is not actually for 54 units, it's for the 270 some.
That is correct. The proposal is for 275 units. And if you look on that very first slide we had, when we said, what is this PD amendment? It's 275 units. That's what we're requesting, because there's 0 units available today. I think the reason we were trying to explain the real difference here, 54, is the net difference between what the original vision was and what is being proposed today.
And I think the thing is you're confusing two different things. You're referencing two different things to make it feel like your request is less of a request. And I understand the technicalities of those units aren't available at this particular moment, but they were originally proposed in the overall PD. I totally understand that. But when you're referencing two separate things and kind of blending them together, it makes it hard for a member of the public to understand the difference. Because you're referencing the 54, making it a lesser seeming request when that's not actually the request. So I just want to make that clear in the record.
Roxy?
Yeah, thank you. I wasn't clear about that either. Staff, where did the other 221 units go? Why are they unavailable? Is that?
Sure. And to be clear, I think the percentage presentation was meant to be illustrative mathematically to show what would have been allowed under the PD and what's being requested. The PD allows for the transference of dwelling units that aren't used in a particular planning area to this planning area, to this filing 14 and filing 15 in the mixed-use planning area. The PD allowed for the 2,800 some odd units, only 2,500 some odd units were actually ever built, meaning that 221 dwelling units could have been transferred to this mixed-use planning area. The caveat of the PD is that those units had to be transferred at the time of site plan. They weren't, so they were lost. They could have been transferred through an administrative process by someone simply reviewing a piece of paper and saying these units are now transferred from planning area 1 to planning area mixed use filings 14 and 15. Because that administrative process wasn't undertaken at the time, they're no longer available. Had they been transferred, a maximum of 221 dwelling units could have been transferred to this mixed use area. The request is for 275 dwelling units. The request for the total 275 isn't necessary because those 221 are no longer feasible or attainable.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, because
Was that administrative oversight, was that a clerical error? Was it something that was just lost in the rush of daily business? Or was it a choice the developer made at the time?
It would have had to have been initiated by the applicant for the planning area to transfer their unused dwelling units to the mixed-use area. If they didn't own that mixed-use area, I don't know what the incentive would have been to transfer
To
their
do
units.
anything with it, right, okay. Oh, that reminds me of another question I have. The commercial outlots and the lower-level mixed use that would be used in those number 3 buildings that you had on your chart, are you going to retain ownership of those commercial properties and be the landlord for those, or are you going to be selling those outlots? And who's going to manage the retail or the commercial property on the multi-use buildings?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. If I might invite the representative from Mill Creek Residential to answer that question directly.
Yeah, the ownership and operation structures of that is still to be determined. We merely wanted to, for the purposes of this PD amendment, was to demonstrate our commitment to the location of the commercial spaces and the amounts as set forth. The retail that's included within the mixed-use buildings will be managed professionally by Mill Creek. The out parcels are TBD at this point based on market demand.
Do you have a history with mixed-use parcels and with the retail on the bottom and the buildings on top? Is this
Yeah.
something you've done before?
Absolutely. Mill Creek actually has a national retail consultant that works on all of our mixed-use proposals. We have actually one of the larger retail owners in the country when you add up all of the mixed-use pieces of our communities around the country.
Okay, thank you.
Rich?
Yes, I have a question for the applicant. In the 275 units proposed, is any of it going to be subsidized housing?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, no, it is all market rate.
Will it have I know there's some apartment complexes in Parker and Douglas County that have a small percentage of units set aside for affordable housing, lower than market rate for renters and people renting. So none of this will be subsidized housing at all?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, I want to be unequivocal about that. No, definitely not. Zero, none.
Okay, thank you.
I've got a few more questions here real quick.
Roxy?
Thank you. These mixed-use vertical buildings, and this could be staff or the applicant, do we have examples in the town of Parker are they in existence in Parker at this point? You really try to drive a hammer into this fits really well with the master plan and character of the town, but I'm drawing a blank as to other locations where this exists.
I might defer to staff on that one.
I'm assuming if it does, it's downtown, but it's not.
We have a few in the entitlement process, but we do have, downtown Parker on Main Street has vertical mixed use, which has ground floor retail and then offices. It's not a combination of residential and
Okay.
commercial. But I think the other example it also not residential, but the hotel on Main Street east of Parker that has ground floor restaurants with the hotel occupancy above, and we do have some in the pipeline.
Okay, so there are a
And then
few.
also the Confluence developments in downtown will eventually be ground floor commercial and residential above.
Okay.
And if I might supplement that,
Yes,
Commissioner,
please.
I would certainly say that in my experience seeking entitlements within the town of Parker, it has always been proposed to my clients that we ought to consider doing that type of development, even though it may not exist in great numbers today, because that is a goal of the towns to get towards more vertically integrated mixed use.
The apartments that went in on Main Street, the Dransfeld and 20 Mile, aren't those mixed-use vertical also?
They do have the ground floor commercial retail component. And just to be clear, the vertical mixed use would be limited to the northeast section of the project site on the intersection of J. Morgan and Parker, and limited to a maximum of 3 stories.
Roxy?
I'm sorry.
a couple more
I didn't
questions.
mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine, absolutely. You guys used the word high-quality retail, and it sounds like Mill Creek has experience with this. I don't know if you can answer this or want to hand it off, but can you describe that, explain how you get these applicants?
How is it curated?
How is it curated? How can we be sure it's not just going to be a Chipotle?
I think that's a question for Mr. Halstead.
Yeah, we've worked extensively with local brokers to identify missing kind of niches in the retail landscape in Parker. The mixed-use ground floor buildings that we're referring to would be, coffee shops, delicatessens, service accounting firms, professional office firms. We've kind of heard that these tenants can't afford the rents necessary to justify the new construction costs of standalone buildings. So the fact that they're situated in the ground floor of our buildings kind of creates what we think is a curated space for them at attractive rents to really activate the sites as negotiated and discussed at length with the town and staff.
Okay, thank you. One more question, and this was on your slide. Traffic calming. Oh, sorry. A lot of presenters tonight. I guess the question is, can you please give us some details into the traffic calming? I understand not putting any new curbs in and not going through Village on the Green, things like that, should keep should keep traffic to a minimum, but are there other efforts for mitigating traffic? I didn't see any, and I guess we're not at that stage yet, but I didn't see any proposals for traffic lights, things like that. I know there's a private school right across the street. Traffic gets really heavy in the morning and the evenings for pickup and drop-off. And I don't know about the pedestrian traffic that exists with those kids, but we want to be very safe for the neighborhood, and especially the children.
Absolutely. A very good question, Commissioner. As you noted, we're not at that stage yet, but we've entertained conversations with the neighborhood, listening to their concerns about traffic, and then offering up that we are open to continuing the conversation, first off. And then we've also had conversations with staff at a preliminary level because, as Julia noted earlier, or perhaps Alex, we're not quite there yet with the site plan. But it's something we put on the table, something that the neighborhood cares about, we care about. And so there's a lot of mitigation approaches that one can take. And it has to be done in conjunction with the city to make sure it meets their criteria as well. And we're willing to work with them. But there are minor things out there. For example, that Mill Creek has indicated to the staff approximately a year and a half ago when we met with them. Some of the crosswalks, you can't see them anymore. So there's a hierarchy of things we can start looking at and improving, simply as getting some paint out there, to more sophisticated approaches that make sense. I can't be up here and say we will do X, Y, and Z right now, because that has to take further study. But
Sure. I wanted to give an opportunity for the public who are going to have the same concerns.
Sure.
Maybe get ahead of that one.
Yep. So, in closing on that comment, we have taken it into consideration and will continue so. Thank you.
You might stay up there for a second. I have some additional circulation questions. My first is sort of a preliminary congratulations for doing a lot of that internal circulation as opposed to what could have been a very circuitous route through that PD. I'm wondering I forget the name of the intersection. Maybe you can help me. Along Parker Road, where the higher proposed density in the
That comes in from the
conceptual
east?
site plan, yeah. Is there any concern for stacking in that area?
Well, that will be a very good question, Commissioner, again. But that will be evaluated as we move forward very thoroughly, and the town staff are very thorough in their reviews. But I can tell you one thing: in early discussions, we were very mindful of the size of that commercial and how it's positioned, that one standalone building that's adjacent to Parker Road. And so what I hope that conveys to you is that's on our radar to think about stacking, and as you get into that commercial. Again, we think it's very important for standalone commercial to be close to the arterials instead of further in. The mixed-use piece is smaller, as Nick mentioned. It's more boutique curated. The standalone could be a little bit more service-oriented. So yes, that is on our radar to look at that further. In the conceptual site plan, we're already positioned the building conceptually to warrant further conversation with staff.
Okay, my next question is this. So if I'm trying not to confuse the zoning request with the conceptual site plan, but when I look at the proposed parking behind the single-family residences that exist, I'm wondering how that circulation and the setbacks and the zoning part of that.
How it would function and work?
Yes.
Okay, good question. So we were very mindful of placing, again, this is conceptual site plan, but we spent a lot of time laying it out, and we were mindful of placing that the parking area in the rear, because what that did is it took it away from the interior street that runs from the north to the south, where we want to see that be more family-oriented, more walkable. We want the buildings to be up a little bit closer, that porch feel, that's activated streetscape, which we all love. And placing the parking lot in the back, it reserves it more for the residences, that if people don't see it, that don't live there, they don't park in it because it's a little bit put in the rear. And also, we didn't want to put the buildings closer to the existing residential. We could place it where the parking is, but we felt the parking is a lower and better use on the west side of that development. And because we will also landscape and buffer that setback area extensively per code requirements and likely exceed it where we can. So there was a lot of thought in putting that parking back there to keep it, tucked away, but, and not impact the quality of the space.
Thank you.
One last thing, while you guys are still, we're still in this portion of the meeting, I wanted to thank you, all three of you, for your presentation as well as your public outreach. I understand it was pretty extensive, and we really do appreciate that. The community appreciates that.
Well, thank you. We're very proud, and we want to thank the community for engaging with us and meeting with us in thoughtful conversations that were productive. And, we heard them, and we have revised our site plan, and also the number of units proposed, down from, don't quote me on this, 322 or 323, down to 275. And those were outgrowths of those meetings and conversations.
Yeah, you can see the effort has been made.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question?
Not right now.
Julia, do you have the comment cards, or the little cards that were up on the podium?
Up there, they're
Or-
sitting to the right.
Oh. Could I just have them? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, folks, this, what,
We thought we were supposed to put
well, yeah, there's already some up there. I can call them up. It just makes it go a little faster this way. Thank you. All right, as I said at the outset, there is a significant interest in this project from neighbors, and if you wish to address this, I have a comment card. I will do my best to pronounce and read people's handwriting. Please forgive me in advance if I don't pronounce your name exactly correctly, because I'm reading handwriting. I mean, I was a teacher a long time, but I can't read all handwriting. But at any rate, when I call your name, I'll call the name of the person that's going to speak and one who's going to be next, so that people can kind of get queued up and know that. And once again, hold your comments to 3 minutes. Try not to restate what your neighbors have said. And we certainly want to hear your thoughts and opinions.
And they need to state their name and address.
And please, you need to, when you get up there, although I've got them on here, as long as your name and address is on here, you don't have to restate it. So, looks like they all are. If it's not, I'll ask you to restate it. So we'll start. Stephen Matthews will be the first one, followed by Dan Jones. So Stephen, come forward. Hope I got your name right.
You did.
All right.
Good job. My name's Steve Matthews. I'm the HOA president of Village on the Green. We've documented some of our main concerns. Number one is the traffic. We're concerned, the traffic study said it would be a 20% increase, but it didn't include the new apartments just north of us. The traffic, well, the best we could understand, that wasn't included. And that's our main concern, traffic, and the roads of J. Morgan's gotten to be a raceway. And it's, I back right up to it, and it's getting horrendous. And it looks like, I guess they're talking about putting a traffic light at J. Morgan and Stroh, which may or may not help, but if you put another one up between the school and this new thing, you'd have nothing but traffic lights on Stroh Road. So that's our main concern.
All right, thank you. Dan is up next, followed by Austin Kennedy. Dan?
Thank you, Commissioners, for having me speak tonight. I appreciate the opportunity. To me, it looks like big money's come back to Parker again. 221 apartments, that's still way too many for them, I'm concerned. We just got hit, and they just occupied a space to the north of us, 225 apartments. Now you're on the east side of our complex, you want to put what they want, 275. And the traffic thing, I don't know who paid for the traffic study. I mean, was it them? Did the city pay for it? I just had a question about that. And if Mill Creek is so concerned about our community, why don't they put in us a grocery store over there, and that might help a whole lot better. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Austin, and that's followed by Pam Hampton. Austin?
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. Jane, especially thank you for clarifying some of those details. Afterwards, I definitely felt a little manipulated as the public with those numbers, so I appreciate that. One thing that hasn't been brought up tonight is the human impact of all this. Crime in Stroh Ranch has skyrocketed since the completion of the last apartment project. No one tonight talked about how we intend to continue to help with that. I mean, we talked about municipalities and industry, but we did not talk about the effect of police, anything along those lines. I mean, Parker PD is getting ready to install cameras into the interior of Stroh Ranch because of the traffic, or I'm sorry, not the traffic, the crime has increased so much. So what are we going to do when we add, a minimum of 274 more people there? Not saying that the people that come in here and living here are part of the crime, but it does bring crime because people are robbing cars every single night. Just the other day, a bunch of youth were beat up outside of the clubhouse. So I'd like to see more information about how that's going to be addressed before we start slamming more homes and apartments into our community.
Thank you. Pam? Pam Hampton? She left, okay. Mark Hampton, he also left, I assume? Okay. Joy Overbeck?
Good evening. I'm an HOA board member at Stroh Ranch. I have been for, 6 years, something like that. We are very alarmed at Stroh Ranch about more apartments in our area. As one of the gentlemen just said, we are dealing now with an apartment complex that is a HUD complex that opened, maybe 4 or 5, 6 months ago, with 600 people and 400 parking spaces on 11 acres right across from our rec center. To say, as these developers seem to believe, that more apartments and more traffic are of no consequence is simply absurd. I mean, the traffic now is horrendous. There are little kids on bikes that are, being semi-clipped all the time because people are racing down J. Morgan where this would be. Thank you so much for clearing up the magical disappearing units conundrum. It seems like there was some manipulation here. We have 275 more apartments. We don't have 54 more apartments than it's allowed. It seems to me that, well, I can see, because I know something about this, that the master plan and the planned unit development are in conflict here. There are no available residences in this area, and yet the developer would have us believe that there were 221 available residences. I went to a couple of these community meetings because I'm a board member, and everybody in Stroh Ranch, not everybody, that's, 99.6% of the people in Stroh Ranch don't want to see this development happen. because it's more traffic, it's more apartments. We want to see ownership. We've lived in Stroh Ranch as a mature community. The planned development and the master development and the planned unit development and everything else have promised to preserve our traditional communities, our communities that people have worked and slaved so hard for to build their homes and to build their families in our community that's been there for over 30 years. So this is not something that we welcome, nor is it something that we approve of. It seems to me that if this development indeed conformed to all the planned development and master plan, they would not be requiring a zoning change. We've been told over and over again that Parker is zoned, that the zoning is fixed and immutable in Parker. So I'd ask you to respect the wishes of the people who in Parker who've lived there forever, and to just retain our beautiful traditional neighborhood without more apartments. We'll have more apartments on Main Street. The commissioners
Time's
just
up, Joy.
voted a lot more apartments west of us, or rather south of us. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
Nick Zimmerman, followed by Justin Scranton.
Thank you, everybody. I'm a homeowner in Village on the Green and Stroh Ranch. Just some of the facts that were pointed out today I'd like to clarify. So it looks like from everyone that was talked to during the door knocking, about 20% of people supported this, so well less than the majority. I'd like some clarification on the land, the circle on the master plan. It looks like most of the land we're talking about here falls outside of the circle, so I would maybe want some clarity on the 80-20 outside of the circle where the land falls outside of. It looks like, so another point of clarification is when we all bought our homes, we talked about the zoning being fixed, that we all knew that those 221 units were not available. It seems like there's some confusion between is it 221, is it 275, but at the end of the day, it is 275. We didn't believe that 221 were available when we bought our homes there, and there's definitely going to be a major impact to traffic and the amount of congestion in the area. Some environmental concerns I'd like to bring up is there are a lot of prairie dogs in this vacant land. I don't think anyone has addressed what's going to happen to the wildlife and animals that are there. I'd also like to bring up some of the other, we talked about it earlier, but some of the consistency with the rest of Parker. There are very few buildings that have, commercial with residential above it, not in Stroh Ranch, nowhere in the near vicinity. So to say that it fits the look and feel of what we already have in the area, I feel I don't really agree with. And then not the correct site. There's a ton of land in Parker, a lot of empty land. So to say this is the correct site after recently having the South Range apartments put in place, we've already added a lot of housing units in the area, and there's a ton of land in the town. So I would say to say this is the correct site, I would not agree with as well. But thank you, everybody, for your time.
Thank you. Justin Scranton.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I respect everybody in here and their opinion and all the hard work that this $1 million lawyer team has put together here. I'm more of a statistical person. I just moved here, so purchasing property at the current value in Stroh Ranch is a major issue for me. What's the rental value going to be? Is that going to improve the value of Stroh Ranch, or is it going to continue to lessen due to, our other apartment complex that was just recently built there? Like somebody else previously said, it's not the people, it's just the congestion. And if it's density that we're talking about, why does all the density need to be in one specific location? As this gentleman spoke, we have tons of land. There's plenty of places to put this. I do see something awesome back there, but to say we need all this housing, the living above the properties below, what happens if we hit a recession? What are we looking at back there? If we don't own the property or they don't maintain it and it starts going south, just whatever. So I have a list together here, just talking points, things to think about. The grocery store. I don't know if you go to a grocery store, shelves are already empty. Like holidays, typical, most grocery stores, eggnog, that kind of stuff. But typically we don't have stuff. So a larger grocery store, as presented before, is definitely an option for sure. That helps the community, the 6,000 houses built behind us, the 300 built next to us are 300 units as well. Traffic, I think we went over that, beat that down. Water. Where's the water coming from? They say this isn't going to impact our municipality. Sewage, water, et cetera, our land, drainage. That's our view. I came to Colorado to purchase a view, my pursuit of happiness. I found my view, I purchased that. I may be only one person, but we need to maintain that. That's what Colorado is. That's why I came here. I left Connect, whatever. That's why I came here. It's a view. To take the view is a crime. Dust control during construction. If we're going to do construction over there, I want times, schedules, dust control. I've been in construction over 25 years, owned companies for 20 years. It's just a major influx on the property and the surrounding community. The people have sleep schedules, people work third shift, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a highly dense area. We already have a ton of noise, ton of traffic. Just a big issue about it. Local builders. Are we going to bring in local builders, or are we bringing in the big guys from out of town? I feel, honestly, if we could support the local builders, a good option. Schedule, we discussed that. Rent values, we discussed that. Their property is about 8 to 10 feet higher elevation than the properties to the east or to the west, and also to Stroh Ranch. So if we're building only 2-story, which is 40 foot, you're looking right into everybody's property. Like, I got to close my windows down. All the people that own the property there already
Justin,
have to
your
close windows.
time's up, please.
Okay.
All right.
Prairie dogs and
Thank
peace
you.
of mind. Those are the last two.
Sir? Yeah, just hand to Julia right there. She's sitting right there, and since I don't have it in front of me, maybe you could give your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Eric Ross. I'm at 18952 East Clear Creek Drive, which is Stroh Ranch. I'm more concerned about the planned development changes or alterations because, as you know, that document is recorded to my property at the county level. And so I have not been notified, or I called my bank on Monday. They have not been notified because they kind of own my house until I pay it off. So I'm very concerned that you're going to be making changes that no one's aware of that has to be re-recorded with everybody in entire Stroh Ranch. For example, if there's 1,800 homes in Stroh Ranch and half of them still have mortgages, that's another 900. So I'm assuming you will be getting 2,700 documents saying either yay or nay about making changes to the planned development of Stroh Ranch. That's all I have to say.
Thanks, sir. Ma'am?
Hi, my name is Kathleen Petrick. I live at 18267 Michigan Creek Way. I'm in Stroh Ranch. One thing that hasn't been brought up here is education. My son goes to Lehman, and they are overflowing. They're building a second campus, which is great, but high schools, where are all these kids going to go to school? And what's going to happen? Our education is already having a hard time finding teachers. Where are kids going to go to school? And what's going to happen to our current schools? They're already overpopulated. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I do want to say, you guys did a great job. I wish you guys were here when the Dominion project happened. We got burned really bad. No one listened to us. We were told that there was no chance of the master plan being changed. And now you guys are coming to us, asking us to change it. And the town and the city are saying, well, okay, let's put it for a vote. So unintentionally, you guys are going to have all of that sort of hostility coming at you. And it is unfortunate, but we were told you can't make
Okay,
the
ma'am.
changes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just if you could hand it to Julia right there. Thank you. And then just state your name and address for the record.
My name is Curtis Kirk. I live at 19046 East Oak Creek Place in Parker.
Okay.
I go back way back with this project. I had an associate that was involved with the Nixdorf family when they originally proposed the Stroh Ranch back in the early 80s. And I'm a real estate developer for 40 years, so I understand where you guys are at. I'm usually on that side of the fence. But I've always stayed away from projects that involved changes to variances, ordinance, and things of that nature, okay, and stayed mainstream. Because I knew when I got outside of that, I didn't know what I was dealing with, what conditions I was going to be thrown at, okay? So number one, in addition to these 275 units that they're putting in here, okay, above what would be normally approved, what is the town going to get from this? What is Stroh Ranch going to get from this? I've never heard anything tonight about any concessions that they were going to give us for giving them these other 275 units. Number one, I'll throw something out here. Maybe a second bridge at Stroh Road there so we won't have the bottleneck there that should have been put in many, many years ago. But something should be giving back to us if this project is approved. And I know for 40 years, okay, if I would have proposed something like this, I don't know what I would have been, maybe a freeway I would have put in for what I was asking for. The other thing is this traffic, okay? There's not going to be less traffic with a commercial than there is with residential, especially multifamily, because mostly you're going to have 2 or 3 renters in there, and all of them is going to have a car. So there's going to be more traffic there than there's going to be with a commercial there. So that's a false statement there, okay? But either way, I don't see how you can approve a project that doesn't have a full development plan, I mean, the engineer drawings and everything, that we'll just discuss that later. We'll approve you guys now, but we'll just discuss that later. I've never ever heard that. Never in my life. And I've had to deal with coastal commissions and all these other things, okay, that, you know, they don't have to deal with here. So to approve a project without having all of those conceptuals and finals by the city, state, whatever's required, okay, engineering especially, it's just beyond me. So I would, you know, heed approving this project without really taking some thought into what, if you're going to approve this, what they're going to give back to the community for these 275 units alone, much less the rest of the impact that it's going to have on the town. And I've lived here in Stroh Ranch for 30 years now, so I've seen the stoplight at J. Morgan be moved 3 times. So, thank you,
sir. Okay. Seeing no more, we will close the public comment. Let's see. Any points of clarification, Julia?
Sure, I can go through a few of the items that I took
Okay.
notes in regards to. The request is a zoning request. It is not a request to modify or change the master plan. There's not a master plan amendment request with this application. It is purely a zoning request. The circle that showed the community center on the master plan map is an approximate circle. It's always been represented graphically as the cross section of a major intersection. The comments that were received and included in the public comment packet included 36 resident letters of support, 17 emails, that's all of the emails that we received up till 6 o'clock this evening, 15 which were in opposition and 2 of which were in support. Prairie dogs are regulated by our prairie dog ordinance. They have to either be relocated or they're humanely euthanized. There's a pause after any approval prior to a grading permit of 30 days for the applicant to go through our prairie dog ordinance and sign an affidavit saying they've worked with local prairie dog relocation groups, and if they do not find a suitable site for relocation, the alternative option in the code is allowed. Construction best management practices as far as construction mitigation are required. And our engineering team and public works and our building department can speak more to that, but for instance, irrigating during excavation and grading to keep dust contaminants at low levels, and those are required mitigation measures. The notification was signed and affidavized. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation of it. There was an affidavit signed that notification adhered to town standards of noticing abutting neighbors. For water, the property is included in the Parker Water Sanitation District. Everything that was required for submission of a zoning request was submitted and included in the original application, and a completeness review for all required documentation was completed. And as far as public improvements, those are analyzed through the site plan process, whether it's traffic mitigation measures triggering additional stop signs or lights or whatnot. But sidewalk improvements, streetscape, those are all required through the site plan approval process.
Okay. Does the applicant have anything they want to add in response?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carolyn White again for the applicant. I think that staff answered most of the things that I had written down, but there were one or two that pertain specifically to the applicant that I thought I might address briefly. The question was raised about whether or not the applicant would hire local builders to construct this project if it's eventually approved. And you might recall that in the beginning when the introduction to Mill Creek Residential was presented, they mentioned that they have their own construction company. They are the GC, and they will hire local subcontractors to execute the project. So the answer to that question is yes. There was a question about education and where kids might go to school that are living in this development, in the families in this development. That is all part of the review process, and I just would mention that this particular product type, multifamily, has a lower student generation rate than many other product types, and the school district does have the opportunity to provide comments throughout this process related to that. I think staff touched on this, but I just want to talk about the public comment along the lines of you can't approve the project tonight because you don't have enough information. And just to clarify again that the project is not before you tonight, only the zoning, which is the first step, right? For the benefit of those watching perhaps online, this just sets the outer parameters in terms of uses, densities, and heights and so on. And then later we come back with the actual project. And at that point, then the town will consider it and review it based on more detailed engineering drawings and so on. And then, gosh, I think that's really it in terms of the technical questions. I think just overall, a lot of folks said that they didn't think that there was a need for 275 additional units of residential, particularly in this location, and also maybe some questions about the 221 versus the 275. I think that staff said it best that that 54 was really intended to be illustrative. It was not intended to be, diabolical in any way. The point was just trying to demonstrate orders of magnitude how different what we're proposing is from what was originally proposed in this location. But certainly when you look at town-wide, at region-wide, and at statewide data, there is no question that there is an urgent need for more housing, particularly multifamily and alternative product types of housing compared to single-family detached. So there's absolutely a need for this project, and there's absolutely a need for it in this location. This is vacant land, the last undeveloped parcel in the Stroh Ranch PD. It was never intended to be anything other than developed. And this particular mix of use types that is being proposed to be allowed with this PD is ideally suited to fit into this last little niche here along Parker and Stroh Road. So with that, we thank you for the opportunity to present this application to you tonight and ask again for your favorable recommendation.
Thank you. Any further questions?
I have a couple.
Okay.
For the traffic engineer. One of the concerns raised by the public in the letters that were commented on, the letters we received as part of the public comment, was the speed of the traffic on the collector roads and main roads in this area. And there was a reference to accident that had occurred. My question is a couple one. First one is, if we have additional traffic, will that increase or decrease the speed of the traffic?
That is something I cannot predict. I mean,
Okay.
it is, I would guess it would end up probably somewhere along the same place it is now, but it's very difficult to predict future drivers' behavior.
The other question I have is, there's been discussion of traffic calming measures. But other than paint on the road, we haven't had much discussion of what types of options, not that anyone's committing to them tonight, but I would like to have a definition by example of types of traffic calming measures that you're talking about.
So I don't know. We've had some very brief conversations about that. The developer may be able to reference what exactly they were talking about. What I can share with the commission tonight is that the town does have a program that works on neighborhood traffic calming. It's called the Neighborhood Traffic Calming Partnership. It involves Engineering Public Works and the police department. It kind of works in stages, right? When there's a perceived speeding issue, we figure out, is there a speeding issue? And then we go through various stages of escalation and trying to do enforcement. And it ends up with potential traffic calming, which I think you're maybe hinting at, something along the lines of hard barriers in the road or something like that that would provide physical traffic calming. So I know there's been a lot of concerns over the years. I know there's been discussions between the HOA and the PD and Public Works. Certainly, we can continue those conversations with the neighborhood if there is a speeding problem out there.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your time. Thanks for coming tonight.
Anybody else?
I had a question for staff. So on that traffic study, or I didn't find that document anywhere in the.
We don't get the traffic studies.
So I guess the question is, there was a comment that they did not include the new residents in the apartments that were just recently built.
Oh, yeah.
I don't even think that they're
Good
all
point.
moved in yet. But I guess, maybe you know, maybe you don't. If they included the other hundreds of single-family homes that have just gone up on Crowfoot Valley, off Motzenbacher there, the ones that are under development that aren't even occupied yet. Because there's literally right on Stroh, there's a 2-lane bridge. Most of that street is really narrow. And there's going to be a lot of traffic coming and going.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I can tell you and the citizens here is that the town does have widening the Stroh Bridge over Cherry Creek in our 5-year CIP plan, so that is actually under design currently. So that will be a project the town does in the next couple of years. Regarding adjacent traffic studies being incorporated into this one, we did provide the engineer with all the adjacent traffic studies, and I should say immediately adjacent. I don't know if we went that far. That's pretty far away and would probably have a pretty minimal impact on these roads, but as far as the dominium, the apartments, the commercial across the street on the southeast corner of Parker and Stroh, those were provided to the applicant to include in the traffic study.
Okay. Thank you.
Julia, I have a question. If this proposal was not before us tonight and rezoned, the 221 units that are proposed for this site, would that mean there would be more retail space available? And because of, if it is approved and rezoned, there's going to be 275 units, does that mean that there's less retail space available?
So the planning area currently allows both commercial and residential uses.
Right.
It allows multifamily, it allows single-family detached, zero-lot line dwelling units, manor home dwelling units, duplex dwelling units, townhomes, patio dwelling units. So it allows for a number of types of housing types currently.
Right.
It also allows for that commercial. Because that 221 wasn't transferred at the time of the development of the other planning areas, what can be built there today is purely commercial. That 23 acres of vacant land could be developed today as purely commercial uses, including all of those automotive uses that the applicant is requesting to be eliminated.
So in other words, there would be no multifamily, no residential buildings, it would be all commercial?
Entirely commercial.
Okay, thank you.
Further question?
I do. There's been a couple of allusions to the, what happened with what's now called the South Range Apartments and this proposal. And there's been some comment by the public that, you know, what we did then is the same as what we're trying to do now. Could someone from staff, legal, Bryce, someone, explain the distinction between what was before the Planning Commission at the time that we were talking about what's become South Range Apartments and what we're talking about now?
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner. The difference is what was before the Planning Commission with Dominium was a site plan. The land use for multifamily was already permitted by the zoning. So there was no request to amend the zoning. It was simply a site plan of, as we've talked about here, architecture, landscaping, access points, all that fun stuff. Tonight is actually a proposal to amend the zoning brought forth by the property owner. So that's the difference.
Thank you. I have a couple more.
Okay.
All right.
You're on a roll.
Yeah, I wrote these down. Okay. One of the things I noticed in the amended Plan Development Guide is that we have a new category called multi-use commercial. Multi-use commercial is not covered in our master plan. It's not a term that's used there. I was wondering if you could explain how, why you came up with, and there's nothing nefarious about, putting something into a PD that's not in the master plan, but I thought it would be useful to discuss multi-use commercial as a category versus multi-use residential, that sort of thing.
Sure, Jeff, would you be able to pull up the PowerPoint presentation that has the highlighted yellow map? And it's actually mixed-use commercial.
That's what I meant to say, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I'd be happy to clarify. So planning staff, when the applicant made this request, because it is a mixed-use planning area that was intentionally meant for a mix of uses, both residential and commercial, wanted to ensure that the town preserved specific parcels for purely commercial development to meet that intent of the planned development. So it was suggested that there be a subset category of the mixed-use planning area, which you see in yellow here, called mixed-use commercial. That mixed-use commercial is shown on this map with the diagonal hatching along Stroh, so it's highlighted in yellow but has diagonal hatching, and then that parcel towards the northeast corner, which also has diagonal hatching. Those areas is a sub-area of the existing mixed-use planning area called mixed-use commercial that will only allow the commercial uses which within Section K of the PD.
And that's the section where we eliminate the use by right of automotive services and that sort of thing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Is this mixed-use commercial, would this be contemplated in any of the other planning areas? Say if there was a redevelop, say they decided to tear down King Soopers, and we've amended this planning PD development guide. We've amended this. They tear down King Soopers to build something else. Would this, what the amendments we're making today, do they affect that?
They do not, because it's exclusive to Section K of the PD, which is exclusive to mixed use and mixed use commercial, which only applies to filing 14 and filing 15. That corner lot is a whole different category. It's the business center. It has its own list of uses, permitted uses, its own development standards. So the section that is being proposed or requested for amendment is exclusive to this highlighted yellow area.
Does the concept that the town has of multi-use, does that require residential?
It does not. The town of Parker has two definitions for mixed use, both vertical mixed use, which is a more traditional thought of mixed use with ground floor commercial and residential above, and horizontal mixed use, which is just different types of commercial uses. Could also be commercial adjacent to a horizontal residential unit. So the town of Parker does not have an exclusive that it has to have a residential component. It's actually a true mix of uses, retail, office, commercial, and can include residential.
Okay. So I gotta look at my notes, somebody else can go.
I don't think there's anybody else.
Of course not. Give me just a second, let me. I'm looking at the notes I took during the public portion of the comment to make sure that we've covered everything. One of the questions that was raised was elevation issues, that there's an elevation difference between the zoned, the current built areas and where we would be zoning for this mixed use and residential. Do you have any further information on that?
I do not have a grading plan that was evaluated. I've been on site to see the site. The site itself seems pretty level, but I don't live there, so I respect the comments of the public in regards to that. So until we see a grade plan, Obviously, we'd have to evaluate the grade plan and ensure that any proposed development was compliant with the height that's already allowed in the PD.
The setbacks along the residential going north-south next to Village Green, that setback is, as I saw in the conceptual, recognizing that it's only conceptual, can you tell us what the setbacks are required under the planned development unit?
Sure, I believe it's 20 feet in the rear, but there's a number of provisions within the PD, including what's called an FAR, a floor area ratio, which limits development to 0.6 to 1. So if you had a 1,000 square foot lot, you could build a 600 square foot building. So floor area ratio has a very limiting effect on or limiting on the massing and build out of a building, because it limits side yards, rear yards, front yards, and height, because you're only allowed a maximum square footage of 0.6 to 1. How that's proposed in an eventual site plan, we have to work through. The town also requires 45% landscaping of the site for multifamily development, which also creates a lot of limitations on the build-out, because you have to provide for 45% landscaping as well as parking. There's a number of factors that limit the massing and scale of buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Can I add one, Ruth Ann?
Sure.
So, since we don't have a grading plan right now, how would the height of the proposed buildings in a conceptual site plan be measured?
So there's no request to change the height in the PD. A commercial building could come in today and build a 40-foot building by right. How that's perceived from a conceptual standpoint is difficult to say. We do have a standard way we measure height in the town, and that's town-wide. I don't know if I have the exact definition, but I think it's average finished grade.
Yeah, so it's measured from the average finished grade of the grade around the building, grade around the building to the peak.
Thank you.
I have one more question for the traffic engineer. One of the issues raised during public comment was the difference between multifamily traffic, single-family residence traffic, and commercial property traffic. Are there any general, is there any general information that you have, not specific to this property or this thing, but just generally how those traffic patterns tend to vary one from the other?
Sure, I can talk about trip generation rates, if that's what you're wondering about.
Yeah.
So all of our traffic studies are required to follow ITE, the Institute of Traffic Engineering, accepted trip generation rates for a given use. So for, say, commercial use, this entity goes out and does studies on different commercial all over the country and figures out how many trips they tend to generate. So they come up with an average, and that is what is used in our traffic study. So when the developer states that, on average, commercial traffic generates less traffic than multifamily, that is true per the accepted trip generation rates. Now, obviously, there's variation in commercial. I mean, there can be different types of commercial, but it's an average of all the commercial types out there.
And multifamily versus single-family residential, is there a difference that's known generally between those?
There is, and I don't have these exact numbers, but I believe single-family generates about 9 trips per day, and multifamily is about 7 trips per day. I think that's more just because of the difference in population in a unit.
Is that seven trips per dwelling unit?
Correct.
Okay, so that would be, okay, thank you. Doing math in my head.
Okay. No further questions?
Can you repeat the numbers that you just said about commercial versus residential?
Yeah, I don't have the commercial numbers in front of me. Maybe the developer can step up and answer that if you'd like. But I know that for residential, single family is around 9 trips per day, and multifamily is around 7 trips per day.
And commercial is?
Again, I don't have that exact number. Maybe the developer's traffic engineer can step up and answer that one.
Commissioner Carolyn White again, while our traffic engineer is flipping through to get the exact number, I think maybe where you were going is what I heard too. I think that you said that commercial generates less traffic than multifamily.
If I said that, I apologize. On average.
That is what I heard.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
I apologize. On average, commercial uses will generate more traffic than residential uses.
Okay.
I'm waiting on their traffic engineers doing.
Good evening, Jeff Plank with Kimley Horn, help prepare the traffic study, 6200 South Syracuse Way, Greenwood Village, Colorado 80111. So, like Alex said, he flipped them, it's reciprocal. Retail actually generates more than multifamily. And in the case of this site, as alluded to previously, a floor area ratio could be applied for commercial, usually 0.25. And so that would allow 127,000 square feet of retail, which would be 4,730 trips on this development area. And our site is expected to generate approximately 3,200 vehicle trips.
Okay.
So that's a decrease of approximately 1,600, 33% reduction.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And one point of clarification, that's general retail. If you get fast food restaurants, gas stations in there, it generates a lot higher than that. So our reduction is based on like a standard general retail.
Thank you. Gas stations are automotive, and that would be excluded from what's being built in, right?
Those were eliminated from the allowed uses.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I got.
All right. We will adjourn the public hearing at 8:55.
I just want to clarify, Mr. Chair, that you're closing the public.
Pardon me?
You're closing, not adjourning.
Oh, I'm sorry. Closing. Thank you, council. It's late. Usually in my jammies at this time. Anyway, we are closing the public hearing and moving on to commissioner discussion. Who wants to?
I'll jump in.
Okay,
Sure,
Rex.
go for it, Roxy.
So, again, great presentation. Really, I like the design. It shows that they did a lot of thought, they did a lot of community outreach. I see some things that haven't really been discussed. I kind of brought up and touched on, because I am familiar with the neighborhood. I can't remember the development exactly, but across Motzenbacher, there's over 400 units going in. That is Town of Parker. We did have that in front of us. There is only one grocery store in the area for all of those new residents, and I think the estimation was going to be over 2,000.
Commissioner Collette,
Get your mic on.
is your microphone on?
But I know that there has been, I think it was noted in the letter from the HOAs, there has been some interest by King Soopers to expand into that lot that is right there on Stroh. I don't know if they didn't get there first or not or whatever, but it is, there is some interest in making that store twice as big, which I think the neighborhood needs. And I'm bringing this up because there's already congestion coming that we're not really, I don't think it's really accounted for in this development. That's a thought. I would have put a pin on that. Also, this is high density at the edge of town. And I think it's a great design. I don't personally think this is the location for it. I think this would be fantastic somewhere closer to downtown where you're getting more of an impact from walking communities and things like that. And as I read through the comments, there is applicant analysis saying the desire for compact, walkable, mixed-use development. Yes, of course, but I don't think it's out at the edges of town where I would see like Robinson Ranch right across Parker Road, where you're getting into acreage homes and things like that. That feels like that was part of the plan as you're heading out of town. The character of the town looks like this, and we've been really kind of just throwing these developments in as a checkerboard without a lot of thought. And I think that because this is showing a zoning change, we have the time and the benefit now of giving it some thought.
Which criteria are you using, Roxy?
My criteria? The master plan, the character of the town. In my opinion of the character of the town it is completely subjective. But from moving here, one of the things that I love about Parker is that it does have agricultural capacity in certain areas. There's a checkerboard of this is an ag zone thing. We've rezoned several of these, and kind of hurts my heart a little bit sometimes because agriculture isn't open space. It's not equal to that. It's commercial. This is an area that is not zoned ag, so that's not necessarily relevant, but it is at the outskirt of town. I despise suburban sprawl, and this is a perfect example of it. we're building density at the edges of town. What's next?
So what I'm hearing you say, Roxy, is that the criteria of not the right place.
That is certainly one of the criteria, yes. Let me see here. I had several points. One, well, that's not really important at this stage, but I think you guys understand that as much as I like this presentation, as much as I like what they're developing, it isn't the right space, and I will intend to oppose this.
Okay. Next.
Go ahead, Ruth Ann.
Okay. I am of two minds on this. I think absolutely we need more apartments in Parker. I know that folks who live in single-family units don't understand that, but there is a huge need for more housing and more housing that will be attainable, and there is actually a growing preference for rental versus ownership among the demographics that are coming up into getting their own places. So do we need more rental housing? Absolutely. Is this appropriate? Is it appropriate to put that much residential into what was thought of as a commercial? This is one of those things where there's like this little loophole that's kind of available, that there was more housing that could go into Stroh, so we could maybe move that residential over. I'm not sure it's the right use for that property. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the number of trips that are being generated by 275 more units. That's 7 trips per dwelling unit per day. That's a lot more traffic. I think that the roads can handle it for the very large roads. I'm not sure J. Morgan can take it. I'm not sure that that's going to work well. When we talked about residential housing and in our section of land use for the master plan, we had a discussion in the master plan regarding the residential emphasis of mixed use. And this would do that. But my concern is that what I see is a bunch of, in the conceptual plan, I see a number of apartment buildings with a commercial use in front of it. And on the north side, we do have I think, was it one or maybe two buildings, thank you, two buildings that actually had true mixed use within that building. Otherwise, we're talking about mixed use within an area, and the phrasing and the wording is confusing. I think that if we had, 4 or 5 buildings that were going to be residential and with retail on the bottom, that would be one thing. But this is basically, it looks to me like the idea is to put in a residential apartment complex with a nod to commercial. Now, one of the gentlemen who spoke in the public comment said, well, what are we getting if we're giving them 275 dwelling units? One of the things we're getting is the elimination of auto use as a right by use by right. That's not a bad thing. If you look at social media, there's constant complaints about how much, all we need is another auto parts store in that part of town. I think that this would elevate that part of town in many ways. That's one of the things that I have weighing against me on the other side. I would very much like to hear the rest of my fellow planning commissioners, their opinions as well, because I don't know yet. I haven't decided.
And I haven't read my criteria yet. Sorry.
Okay, I have a few comments.
Jump in there.
So I want to thank the applicant for reaching out to the community and involving them with meetings and open houses and one-on-one meetings and so forth. And I personally like the plan that's designed for this area, with, especially by the Village on the Green homes, putting the parking lot where it is and moving the actual physical building away from right against the Village on the Green home, single-family homes. And I firmly believe that having it all commercial is going to be a lot more traffic, and doing away with the auto parts, mechanics, repair shops, or a convenience store, gas station, where you would have much more noise or fumes from those establishments, and creating a residential area is much better. And it provides a little bit of retail, which I think is needed in that area, considering the growth down south. And I know Anthology, there's going to be some commercial up in that area, mostly probably on Hess Road. But I think it's a good design. I like it. And plus, you're including a lot of area for a park for that community. And just to be clear on this 80-20 thing, it's not just Stroh Ranch 80-20 single family versus multifamily. It's the entire Parker area that I think the town tries to stay within the guidelines, or the ratio of 80-20. And I've been to many economic presentations in Castle Rock, Castle Pines, Lone Tree, and Parker. And there was one a couple years ago where the presenter stated that their ratio was 60-40, 60 single family and 40% multifamily. So I think we're fortunate to live in Parker, where they tried to keep that ratio down to 80-20. And Stroh Ranch was developed in the 80s, and I know that's 30-something years ago, 35 years ago, but it's hard to predict and plan what population will be like in 35 years. But I think they did their best, and we have to work with the traffic situation. And I personally don't think it will be as bad as if you had complete retail or commercial in that area. And the increase in the number of units is, I think, minimal. 1.9% basically is minimal for the area. And I think they met the nine criteria that the town sets forth. And there is a need in this area for this development. So I will be in support of it.
Okay.
I agree with the last commissioner that spoke, in that I believe that the uses proposed in the proposed zoning are needed at this point in time in the marketplace. I also agree that there is a need for diversified types of housing within the town of Parker. And I think that this, while it's hard to extricate the conceptual site plan from the zoning, the opportunity in the zoning to create an additional housing type mix, I think, is necessary for the town of Parker overall. As relates to the engineering, the actual engineering will be approved in a site plan and not in the zoning. Do I think that overall the roads that exist can take the proposed amount of traffic? Yes, I do. I appreciate the applicants trying to keep the traffic internal to the proposed or perhaps proposed development. So I believe that the criteria have been met, and I will support the applicant.
All right, that comes to me. I have a lot of thoughts. Again, I want to thank the applicant for their thorough processes in planning this presentation and working with the community. I also wish to thank the community members, the few of you that are left, for attending tonight and providing your input, and those of your neighbors who might be watching on video. I'm also of the opinion that I think we get a lot of I'm going to use stories. A lot of stories get started on social media, and that we used to say in the school business. That's what I was in my prior life. Is that we'll believe about half of what we hear at school if you'll believe about half of what you hear at home, and I think that goes for social media. I think people get on there, and if I recall correctly, the Parker Police Chief said that actually, crime statistics are down. Is it down at your house? No, not if you got robbed, but that's your house, But in general, they are down. The school being overcrowded is also a canard, that the school that you might want to get into might be crowded, but there is capacity or the school district won't sign off on it. And I know from my experience is that the student generation from apartments is very low. And always has been. I think this is, I'm going to respectfully disagree, Roxy. I see this with the Ironstone apartments there, or condominiums, pardon me. The condominiums and the kind of the office building that's on J. Morgan and that road that goes through there, I don't know the name of it. But anyway, this seems like a logical use with the Lazy Boy store and the other commercial on the front. This seems like a good blend. At the same time, you're getting some housing that we were talking about a teacher shortage earlier. Yeah, that's because they can't afford to live out here. I mean, I won't get into the politics that they're not paying them either, but anyway, they can't afford to live out here. And maybe if there was more housing, even if it was market rate, perhaps, we could have these people living closer to where they work, and we could get some applicants for those positions. I don't want to go off on a political rant here, but I had a teacher that I hired, one of the last ones I hired for our school district 12 years ago, that left this school district to go to Brighton, and she made $10,000 more a year. Tell me, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, in the richest county in the state, So anyway, that was just my political statement. But I like the plan. I like what this, I think it is the right use for that area. I can guarantee you that if we left the commercial as is, we'd be back here at a period of time, and the same people would be here, raising Cain with us if we were going to put in a gas station, a garage, a discount tire, a Firestone store, all that on that same property. I just know, because I've been doing on this commission long enough to know how that would fly. So I'm not saying this is less. I think this is a good use of that property. I think people get into the position where they think, well, it's just open space, just stay open space. Well, it's not open space, it's private property.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I am in favor of this plan.
I think for me, what it's going to come down to is that it's not mixed use if you don't have residential there. And while I'm not terribly excited about, the concept plan was presented very beautifully. I particularly enjoyed the pictures of the houses and the people biking and walking, and that's a really nice image to have. I'm not particularly excited about the site plan, but I will vote in favor of the zoning amendment because I think that we need the housing in this town. And this is mixed use. There is some commercial in it. It doesn't have to be exactly the way it's been laid out there. It may end up being, I don't know. But I will go ahead and I will vote in favor of this. That's everybody.
Do we have a motion?
I move the Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve the zoning.
I will second.
It's been moved by Rich, seconded by Jane, that Planning Commission recommend Town Council approve the zoning, and I will call the question. Jane?
Aye.
Roxy?
Nay.
Ruth Ann?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Chair is aye. Motion passes 4-1. All right. Let's see, last time. Bryce, any thing for the group?
Yes, you should have in your email, an email from Jeremiah Fedig, that the Bike and Ped Master Plan is posted, the adoption version, which you'll be hearing at the next meeting, I believe.
Okay. Anything further? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn
I
the
second.
planning commission
Who
meeting.
seconded?
I did.
Oh. It's been moved by Rich, seconded by Ruth Ann vehemently that we adjourn. Jane?
Aye.
Roxy?
Aye.
Ruth Ann?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Chair is aye. Good night, all.